It's just Grace stuff.
Oh, do you have dogs barking?
It was seen, and you can hear the dogs, and I can hear your
You're just
backup
beeping.
noises, and
Your backup noises.
that's exactly what we're doing here. Hello, everyone. I am Briar Harvey. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network, and for my birthday, the fabulous Grace Edison gave me a podcast. So
And we both have cats.
we both have cats, so everyone is here on the same page. It's going to be a great time. Um, we wanted to put together a show talking about mental health in a very real and honest way. And I think part of the problem here is that when people are talking about mental health, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of judgment, and there is a lot of sentiment about what we could be doing better. And I think we just wanted to have a real conversation about what it actually feels like to have a broken brain.
Well, and I think originally when we were talking about theirs is no originally. We've been talking about this for years at this point.
Truly.
But when we were talking about doing the podcast, a big thing for me is we've talked a lot about neurodiversity in terms of autism and ADHD, which will be part of this conversation, of course. It can't not. But that we don't really hear so much about some of the others, which is bipolar 1 and 2 and 3. And others. Oh, you're muted.
Is
Is
there
there?
a three now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's new to me.
Yes, there's a 3 now, apparently anyway. I know someone who was just recently diagnosed. So,
Mm.
um I I also find that the stigma tends to be that it just becomes who you are. And that's always been a problem for me. That's always been really difficult because I am I don't know if I'm like if I can say I'm not maybe well, I'm not typical in any way, but I live a very successful life in many ways, and yet I still struggle very much deeply and you know more deeply at times with having bipolar 2, which we can kind of define if we want. So hypomania versus mania, and I just want to be able to talk more about it. I think it's not being talked about enough. Although Taylor, I think Tomlinson, the stand-up comedian, talks about it a lot, and I'm like, you stole my bit. You stole my show. But I seriously appreciate it being, something that's being brought up more because we do hear a lot about, there are these certain ones that, like when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I told everybody. I didn't care. I was proud.
Right. ADHD is cool. If you're an entrepreneur, it's your superpower.
Right. Like I said to Briar earlier before we started recording that my dad, who passed away in 2014, had a friend who owned a really successful restaurant. And on the card, it said his name. And then after his name, it said ADHD, like PhD, but ADHD. And I wanted to have ADHD so that I could put that on my card. And I mean, dreams really do come true, everybody, because here I
Wish
am.
granted.
Yeah. So I have ADHD and bipolar 2, and I'm just much more likely to tell people that I have ADHD. And what is it, like comorbidity or something? Like these
Right.
two things, they coexist and they battle each other at times. And I think one of the things that I do want to talk about today is just the fact that it was very confusing for a long time as to what the actual problem was. Like I've been through burnout, certainly, which is more, well, it's a combination of manic episode or hypomanic episode to be correct. Um, Also having ADHD, and ADHD is an autism spectrum disorder, right? We're not sure. Okay.
Kind of.
So
They're
there,
related. There's the in the DSM, the symptoms for ADHD and autism are actually not the same, but there's so much comorbidity here that it's a really difficult thing to talk.
Well, and I think for me it's still unclear whether it's ADHD or autism, right? Like there's I'm at the point now where it doesn't matter much. Like it's good to have some kind of a diagnosis and a title. I think it's helpful because not that it's necessary, but I think it's been helpful for me because I'm like, okay, I can name certain things. Um and the bipolar diagnosis was incredibly helpful. I recently had a bipolar relapse, which is really difficult. So I had a depressed episode that lasted just over 7 months, and it was the worst depressed episode that I've ever had. So anybody watch, that's what happened to Grace. She didn't leave bed for 7 months, or did, but very infrequently. The bed still has a dent in it.
Oh man, I know all about that dent.
Yeah, it's quite the badge of honor. Look at my dent that I
It's
made.
it's where the nest is.
The nest. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to send you like an updated nest picture. People have always said that when I used to teach yoga, I used to have like things all around me. And they were like, why do you have so much? You have so, like some other teacher once said, like, you have too much stuff up. And I'm like, stuff? This is a nest. I have to have like the blanket and the pillow and the speaker and my phone and my notebook and the candle and the whatever. Like I'm making a safe haven for myself. Then I'm going to get in it. What do you mean stuff? Yeah.
This is 100% a thing. So let's start there. How old were you when you were diagnosed bipolar?
Well, so when I was first diagnosed with what like general like clinical depression, I was 13 or 14. So I've been on every single SSRI that you could possibly name. Like I could go through them and it would be very impressive, right? Like Prozac, Paxil, Effexor, Celexa, Pristique, like the Luvox, Sertraline. The list goes on. I've been on all of them. Um, and that went on until I was actually the only time that I was like the best time of my life was when I was pregnant, surprising, with the twins. And so that went on from the time I was about 13, 14 until I was 30. I'm 40, so we'll say it was like 3, 4 years ago. So I was 37, 36, 37 by the time I got to the psychiatrist. In Canada, it takes an average of 9 years to get properly diagnosed. Just so everybody knows. And that's if you're actively pursuing it. So I was saying to someone the other day, like, you have to, maybe it was you have to, like, when people say you have to advocate, like, no, you have to claw your way,
Hmm.
like nails dragging down cement to get a diagnosis. And when you do that, it's still going to take you potentially a decade to get properly diagnosed.
I have a friend going through this with the NHS in the UK. It's very similar. It's certainly not better here in the States. The average is 7 years to up to 15, depending on your various and assorted marginalizations.
Hmm. And before I forget, I want to, at some point in this conversation, talk about just the fact that, like, we have this idea of what someone with bipolar or whatever, like, you can name a bunch of different things, but serious psychiatric disorders, what we think that they're like or they look like. And I just want to say, like, this is the face of someone with bipolar: smart and cute, right? Like, and successful. And it wasn't until I didn't really realize, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this too was I didn't really realize how incredible we are until I talked to my doctor. She was leaving, so I no longer have a doctor, which is awful. But she was leaving, and her and I've had our battles over the years. And she just said to me, like, I always cry when I tell people this. She said, and I don't have tissue in my office. Fuck. She said, she said, I just have so much like admiration and respect for you because bipolar is one of the hardest psychiatric disorders to have. And it was because I had said to her, like, I'm feeling better now, and that's great, but it's also not great because it means that I have to make up for the last 7 months. And I was already trying to repair from the manic episode, right? So it's like you're either fixing the shitstorm that you created when you were manic, but felt so good, or you're trying to get like yeah, not what's the word, like recoup. You're trying to make up for the lost time from when you were making a dent in your bed, right? So it's like it's a very challenging thing to deal with and to live with.
And I feel good now. So I got to be constantly on guard for the mania to come back because God knows that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So the diagnosis, I went on, I was on lithium, and I was having at the time, it was pretty good. I had probably the best 2 years, aside from the year I was pregnant, which was still awful in its own way with the twins, but like I wasn't having episodes. Um, but then I got diagnosed with ADHD, and that threw a wrench into everything because we thought maybe that's what was going on, was like burnout cycles from ADHD. So I went on ADHD meds, stimulants, and then it was like I was having some side effects. Like with a lot of the medication that you take for bipolar, you get moon face, right? Like this sort of puffy face. And I have a round, chubby face anyway. So it was like but it was hurting. Like it was starting to like hurt my around my eyes. So I was taking, I said, can I come off of that? So yes. Okay. So I came off of that, but it was my family doctor who had taken me off, and the psychiatrist actually later this year told me, after I was referred back to her, that when you're stabilized, it's really dangerous. Like when you get to a point where you're stabilized, which I was, it's really dangerous to come off medication. And it might be okay for a year or so, which was literally the exact amount of time that it was seemingly okay. And then I had a manic episode, and then I had like a fairly severe manic episode, and then I had a very severe depressed episode, and I couldn't get out of it. So I'm now on new medication, and thank the Lord. Like I am really grateful. And that's the other thing I want to say, is that I went through that whole like, oh, I don't want to be on meds for such a long time. And I just want to say they can be life changing, and I am no longer judging myself for that. And I hope anybody listening to this, that and trying, I had to try a lot. I had to try a lot of different, and that's really hard. So anybody going through that, I feel for you.
And the med juggle and trying to figure out what's working there can be really difficult because you have to be very aware of what your symptoms are all of the time. You have to try and track that stuff. If you are not keeping good records, then one of the things, and we probably have a whole episode about this, but one of the things that happens when you are bipolar is that in general, medical people stop trusting your evaluation of what's actually happening to you
And everybody in your life.
and everybody in your life. Oh, you must be manic right now, or you're
Yeah.
just depressed. Like, no, actually,
I
this
have
is
real
my lived
feelings.
experience right now. Believe me, please.
Oh yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And I mean, and like, and for me, like, even not trusting myself, right? Because and the hardest thing is like when you're manic, it feels so friggin' good that you like, I don't want it to be that that's what it is. So there's a massive amount of denial, even though the signs and the symptoms are all there, right? You said something else, and I had a thought. You said, like, stop trusting, and I can't remember. I tried really hard to keep a list of like what are the telltale signs. And I do have a couple people in my life who, you're seeming like you're manic right now. Um It's easier to hear when it's not in the moment when I'm trying to express myself, right? It's like in a calm moment to be like, lately I've noticed these things. So we've had to kind of build that in as part of the conversation, right? Yeah.
And what's difficult here that I think a lot of people who are not bipolar don't understand is that mania feels good. There is no point of a manic experience that is not 100% enjoyable to me.
Mhm. Mhm. All of it. Even being mean
Hmm.
feels good.
Maybe especially
Oh,
being mean.
especially being mean. Um I think what I was gonna say, or I don't know what prompted this, but you were talking about like the people in your life not maintaining friendships is really hard, and that's a whole other podcast episode. I think it's like maintaining relationships is really hard because, and the people that are still in my life love both versions of me. They love Dr. Jekyll and they love Mr. Hyde, and they've sort of learned to see through it and to know who's really in there. Um, but I've found that, like, it's hard to explain, um, and if I have to explain too much or people are really like, "I know, but you weren't there," or "I know, but," it's like, yeah, I can't do any more than tell you what my lived experience is. Like, the last depressed episode, I was unable to function. Um, wasn't a choice. There was no choice. And then people telling me to go for a run, go for a walk, go for a walk.
You just need some sunlight.
I mean, there are definitely things that are helpful for sure. Like, I go to bed early, which is a bipolar thing. Is like we stay up really late and we sleep in. So when I studied yoga and Ayurveda for however many years, that was one of the things that I really kept. And I feel so much better when I go to bed early and I get up at the crack of dawn. Like, I've been getting up at 5:30 and I was not a morning person. Like, let me tell you, this is hard. This is not like, oh, yay. No, this is hard every single day, but I do it because it makes a difference. And yeah, walking is great. But when you're in the thick of it, the only thing that is even within reach is like fucking showers are not within reach. It's like sleeping and maybe eating ketchup chips.
Yeah, bipolar depression has a specific flavor to it that's difficult to describe to people because it feels it's like depression on steroids, right? It's I'm not just depressed. I'm depressed and actively contemplating killing myself most of the time.
Mhm. Mhm. Straight up. Yeah. But that's the other thing is you can't really tell anybody because, like, I have one friend that I can tell these things to. I mean, outside of you. So there's like probably two and a half people that I can say, hey, these are my thoughts today. This is where I'm at. This is how I'm feeling. And not be concerned that I'm going to end up at the hospital, right? Because, like, what's that going to even do, first of all? Um, I feel pretty safe most of the time that, like, I can anchor myself in like my family and my children and all of that stuff, but it gets pretty dark. Um,
And what's the suicide rate for bipolar?
It's really high.
It's really
It's really
high,
high.
y'all.
Yeah, it's really high. Like, pretty much anytime I hear of someone that I knew or respected as that, like a celebrity or whatever, there was a yoga teacher who I absolutely adored in the Lower Mainland here in BC, and he had bipolar and overdosed because he was just looking to relieve, right? Just looking to relieve the pain, and actually went to his doctor to get some opioids, I believe, and the doctor refused. So, I mean, it is really hard, but I think, aside from all of those things, like, I definitely want to bring awareness to all of that, but it's also, I wanted to talk about it to basically say, like, and we still exist, and we rise. And every morning we get up and we do the things. And that was really what my doctor was saying, like, holy shit, look at your life. Like, with the suicide rate being so high, and or the addiction rate, because that's another piece, is like, addicted to drugs, alcohol, spending money, gambling, whatever it is also
You
really
forgot
high.
sex.
Sex, yeah, yeah. And I think of all the people who are undiagnosed, right? Who don't even who and that's really where it's difficult because there's just no, like, I think back and, like, I could not see the cycles. Like, you can't see the forest for the trees. I thought when I was manic, I was my actual self, and then I was having depressed episodes.
Right, because it feels so authentic and real and wonderful. And I really can't emphasize that that's really difficult to explain to people because when I am manic, I never want to be anything else.
Oh, yeah, no. I just grip onto that, like, I'm just, like, holding on to it so tight, like, don't go anywhere. Because like, the things that can be done and the amount of time that they can be done in and how like, my brain just, like, you remember that movie, Limitless with, Bradley Cooper, I think? That's what it feels like. Like, you're on that limitless pill. I'm not even kidding. Like, and I know that, like, it's hard to understand, and it's like, "Oh, you're just perceiving things that way," but, like, no, I'm able to do shit that I've never been able to do in my life and recall things and, the way that I can communicate and speak and all of that. But it's extremely fast. It's extremely sharp. Like, I get very, um aggressive, I think, and abrasive is a very, like, it's rough, it's sharp, if you had to describe it in kind of like qualities. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And it's why the crash on the other end is so
So,
significant.
yeah. And so awful. Like, it's and so awful. And so, but I mean, it is really incredible to be able to still, like, this is the thing. It's like, I don't even know how to describe this. Like, I want to say what this is like, and at the same time I don't want pity and I don't want to be discounted. I want to be able to talk about it. I want to be able to say, like, yeah, I have bipolar. So there will be times where this will happen or that will happen, and I want to be able to disclose those things. Like, I've talked about it on Facebook, and most people, actually, I got a funny story to tell you. Um, there was Oliver has a friend who sort of was a new friend this year, and they were talking, and I had met his mom at some point. We had gone out for a mutual friend's birthday, and he said, "Oh yeah, like, my mom knows your mom," and he said, but the other kid said, but I think they drifted apart and they're not really friends anymore, and which isn't even true. And Oliver said, "Yeah, my mom has bipolar." I mean, like, look, he's not wrong. Like, it was not an inappropriate, response. However, I did have to explain to him, like, there's a time and a place, and, like, actually we weren't really close friends. There wasn't like, we had gone out together and we knew each other and we say hi to each other and all of that, but there wasn't like we were getting together on the regular. So it was but it was interesting to me that he's obviously heard me talk about how it has an effect on friendships, right? And relationships. And then I'm there and then I'm not. And I totally understand. Like, I don't hold it against anyone who can't deal with it. Like, they shouldn't, if they don't want to, they shouldn't have to.
Right. I
I'm
don't have
okay with
any
that.
expectation of support or like long lasting friendships because frankly, I'm not that up to the task.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'm not asking people to, like, to deal with it, or saying, like, well, this is just the way that I am. Like, I'm basically saying, like, this is the way that I am, and I don't expect you to have to deal with it. I mean, but if you want to, great. And if I want to, put up with your shit, then great, because we all have shit. Um, just because you're not bipolar doesn't mean you don't have shit.
Oh no.
Everybody,
No, everybody has
you
shit.
got shit.
But the flavor of this shit pile is real distinct.
It's real distinct. Yeah. Um, really helpful for me. was like very, very much like pursuing a diagnosis, if that's possible, to do that and to stay on them, and to document and to chart sort of like, I think one of the most helpful things that I've done is like just keeping a loose journal of like, today felt like this has been going, so I know how long things have been going on for, when it started, what it felt like, what the symptoms are, even physically how I feel in my body, because my nervous system was a wreck. And so, like, just being able to keep those notes. I would also say, like, there are certain habits that are going to be great, and do start doing them when you feel good and keep up with them. And sometimes that's really hard regardless. The little things matter a lot, like drinking enough water and like getting in the bathtub and, trying to have a shower at least once a month. Just kidding. um, but and having like that support system, like it's so nice to have Briar to talk to, and that you understand. And even my friends that don't have it but that really try to just hold space and understand. And I will say, like, for me anyway, I can't really, um the supplements weren't cutting it, and I can't smoke weed. Well, I might be able to smoke weed again, I feel like, but I haven't been able to. Like THC, both THC and CBD were just like a no-go for me. And obviously alcohol is not an answer, or I found that it wasn't an answer for me. So medication has been like a godsend. And so those things are all super helpful. And I think also just knowing a lot about it, like Reddit, so helpful. I'm grateful for Reddit, because it was like, even when it came to medication and just being able to have conversations with people who understood and could name things.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And again, because I say people, but mostly I mean medical people, are so dismissive of our lived experience that when talking about it, it's really nice to get validation from other people who have been there and gone through that, as a, no, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
You're just bipolar
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes you feel pretty fucking crazy.
all the time.
Yeah. And it's like, it's also very hard. It's been hard on my family, right? It's been really hard on my family. And so the other thing too is, I don't even know how I want to say this, but I think like it can be very confusing as to what's going on. And like, I know now for sure that I have bipolar, and it's not just it's not the ADHD or potentially autism or burnout. That's what it is. And I think that's the other thing, is we don't want it to be that, and even other people don't want it to be that, because it's such it seems so grave. But I think coming to terms with it like sucks, but it's way better on the other side than trying to brush it off as something else. Does that make sense?
100%. And I think part of the problem is that the treatment for bipolar is so all over the map, right?
Oh,
Like,
it is.
lithium is the standard, but if lithium doesn't work for you, or if lithium causes liver damage, which it
Yeah.
does for most of us at some point in time, I can't ever take lithium again. I
Right.
took it for enough to get the liver damage, and now that one's gone.
Yeah.
So, what's left to us med wise is a mixed bag of anticonvulsants
Yeah.
and really serious drugs with really serious side effects.
Yep. Yep. For sure. And I'm on like a cocktail that is working really well so far, and I did have to get through some side effects, and that was for sure difficult and frustrating. But that's why I say it it's for me anyway, at this point, it was worth the trial and error to get to where I am now, because it was I mean, I wasn't going to be able to continue to live the way that I was living. Like, the last depressed episode was like, if I ever have to go through that again in my life, I fear for my life. It was that severe. And it's really, I mean, we haven't even mentioned work.
Right.
Like, and I think while being self-employed is a huge bonus because we can choose to ramp up and, and I've had the ability to do that, of saying like, I'm going to take on more clients or more work, or I'm going to reduce, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. Like, and I've got, a lot of versatility in my skills. Again, I'm saying this because it's like people with bipolar are not fucking dumb. They're not idiots. Like, we're very, very, very smart people. So we have a massive amount of talent and skills, but it's difficult to be self-employed because there is no disability time off, paid leave, whatever, right?
Well, and that's assuming you have a job at all, because
Yep.
unemployment and underemployment for bipolar folk is almost as high as it is for autistic people. We
Mhm.
don't we don't hold down jobs because we're great until we go off the deep end, and then you're not going to see us for 6 months.
Yeah. Well, and this is where I started to learn that like short-term engagements, right? Or like like we'll renew after this much time, or we'll renew after this much time. And like trying for me was like trying to get through with the people that I really trusted. And that's really hard to find. I understand that. But for sure, guaranteed there's somebody watching this going, like, well, I was kind of thinking about hiring Grace to do something, and like maybe, and that's the part that I'm really talking about. It's like the way that we don't have awareness of it. It does not mean that I'm not that, and even when I'm depressed, I'm going to do a good job. It's just way harder for me. It's taken everything I've got, right?
But the implicit judgment that people have about bipolar is absolutely inescapable.
Yeah. I would honestly make it my life's mission to talk about this. Like, I feel that because and I've said this, you and I've talked about this before, but I think more common than we know because it's so hard to get diagnosed. It's so hard to get diagnosed, and it's misdiagnosed often because they're seeing just that, like, this is what my doctor said, or I don't know, someone said this. It's hard to get diagnosed because the only time that you go into the doctor is when you're depressed. You ain't going in there when you're manic. You feel fucking great. And I don't even remember who, I think it was my therapist who was like, "You might be bipolar," because she'd seen me for 6 years. And she was like, "Okay." And she would say to me, like, "Well, you're very, very," she was the one that was like, "You're very sharp today." Not sharp as in smart, but like pointy. Like, you're, and I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't care."
I was diagnosed at 16, and I think I, in this way, got lucky. Got lucky because I was manic at the time, and my
Oh.
parents had taken me in. And
Mm,
it took this doctor exactly 10 minutes to have a conversation with me and go, oh, yeah, this is classic mania.
really? Hmm.
But most people don't get that because media feels good. I'm happy. I'm doing things. I'm living my life. I was not, and in I'm type 1. So in true classic mania, I wasn't sleeping. I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
I think when
Or
I went to the
eating.
or eating, and I think I had been up for almost 72 hours when I spoke to the psych the first time,
Oh
who
my
was
god, I
like,
can
"Oh
just
yeah,
picture it.
this isn't normal. You're not supposed to be doing this." I'm like, "But why? It feels fantastic."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what's funny is that the mania feels good to us. It feels terrible to the people around us. The depression feels terrible to us, but feels good to the people around us to some degree. Like, I just find that my family would probably much prefer a depressed version of me over a manic version of me because I'm cuddly and I'm slower and I'm, kind of, and I'm not talking a mile a minute and coming up with 9 million ideas and buying all the shit from Amazon. There's like very telltale signs, but at least I still love the Funko Pops.
I was about to say, there was a moment there where people were legitimately concerned about your
The
Funko
Funko
Pop
Pop.
budget.
Yeah, and I mean, true, like valid. It was, but sometimes the things we do when we're manic end up being actual sources of joy, and they are still very much a source of joy. I just now can only buy one like every few months. Um, so yeah, I think that it's just a conversation. Like I know this conversation's had a lot of elements to it, things that we've said we'd like to talk more about, and like the friendship thing and the work thing, and we're the getting diagnosed and all the rest of it. But like I just want to have a conversation because I was very much feeling like it was left out of the conversation. And we say we talk about mental health issues, but like do we though? Do we? We talk about anxiety and depression, but really how far into that do we go? And I find that for me too, not just what I see, is that we talk about things after the fact. So like it's
Mhm.
not really that I'm not I mean I did try because I had a commitment to saying like I'm struggling. I'm in a very bad depressed episode. But the problem is like again, I just don't want the pity. I would just want the awareness, and I just want people to know, and I just want to be seen and heard, and attempted to maybe even to be understood. And I also want other people to feel seen and heard through me.
Because there are good mental illnesses and there are bad ones,
Well,
and
yeah.
bipolar is definitely a bad one.
Yeah. It's a bad one. And it's
Mhm.
like you are a ticking time bomb of sorts. Like, watch out. Don't get too close, you know? But I really do appreciate, like I said, like people like Taylor Tomlinson who are talking about it, and it's in a funny way, and that counts. But I still think that we need to, as regular old schmucks, just talking about this kind of thing, because I've had people write to me, which I love, and say like, would you have a conversation with my kid, or like you give me hope that like my kid who really struggles with whatever is going to be okay. And I'm like, you think I'm okay? Thank you so much. But I am okay. Like that's the thing, that underneath it all, like although I'm not okay at all, I'm really okay. Like I'm doing really well. And I think it's this coexistence of like things being absolutely horrible and horribly excruciating, but also at the same time like persevering and getting through. And I do maintain friendships. I have a friend that we've been friends, and we talk almost every day since I was in grade 7. So like I can fucking maintain friendships with the right people. And just because I don't talk to somebody for a while, that doesn't mean anything either. And I think we need to really like start to normalize this, that like that has nothing to do with how much. And I think it's also, we would maybe we would talk more if this kind of topic was comfortable too. Like, are you making the space comfortable? I'm sure as shit making the space comfortable. People can tell me anything. I'm not going to be shocked.
Deliberately cultivating that space is very, very difficult. And it is very hard for people to sit with the discomfort of these types of conversations.
Yep. And yes, and you miss, like, in being fearful of having these conversations, you miss a whole lot of awesomeness, because to be perfectly honest, the people I know with bipolar, or potentially with bipolar, are incredible fucking people. They really are, because we have persevered. We have been through some shit. We really understand the gamut of being human, like the spectrum, and like of human emotion, and be dark nights of the soul. Like,
I remember the first time I saw the emotion wheel, and I was like, can I be feeling all of these things at
at
once?
once. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's the experience for us sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I want like go back to the beginning of the conversation. Like I want to be able to be like, "Hi, I'm Grace. I have bipolar." I do want to disclose it. I do want to be able to say, because I want people to have an example of someone they know that's like actually, you know, not actually, but that's doing well and that's open about it. Like I don't want it to be um yeah, I don't want it to be so stigmatized. It's so fucking stigmatized. And like I said, I'm so much more likely to be like I have ADHD. I would be more likely to say like I'm on the autism spectrum, which isn't that wild.
No, there are certainly, and having all three, let
Yeah.
me tell you, the degrees at which we get faces down the ladder is, I mean, it's almost universal. ADHD, that's fine. Autism, yeah, that's a little squicky. Bipolar, ooh,
Yeah. Yeah. But
there's
again,
something
like I think
wrong.
it's that we have, and I don't know cuz I'm only 40, so I don't know what it was like to, you know, have a lobotomy or whatever, but like back in the day, these things were like death sentences pretty much, right? Like the plague. And so, yeah, like you're not going to catch it from knowing me or talking to me about it. I'm not going to make you depressed because I'm depressed, like, or manic or whatever it is.
But I have
Again, you,
friends that still have gone through electroshock therapy.
what?
Like, oh yeah,
Oh my God.
this is still considered a valid treatment. We're frying people's brains in the name of s- something. I don't know what.
Mm, mm, yeah. And I don't know what I want to say exactly. I guess I've said this already, but like I go back to I really, really, really was against medication for the longest time and just rebuked all Western medicine for a long time too. Um, and I'm at a point now where I'm like, I will be on medication for the rest of my life, so long as it helps. So long as it's helping, I'm on it because you've seen it, I think. You've witnessed all the stages of this, I think, at this point.
Well, I mean, we have been friends at this point in time almost 4 years now. I think we've started working together shortly after your diagnosis.
Mhm.
And so it's been a journey for you. It's for me, it's one I've been on a whole lot longer and I've gone through all of the meds and most of them don't work. So I am back to smoking weed and microdosing mushrooms.
Which is great.
Mhm.
Didn't work for me, but, like, I know how many people it has worked for. That and, ketamine therapy.
Mhm. Ketamine is also particularly effective for bipolar.
Yeah,
And we're starting to have conversations about how this works, but it's still pretty French.
yeah. I just think, again, like, I hope that this, spurs new, like, just more conversation or people saying, like, like, even if you just tell me, you know? Like, getting comfortable telling one person, because like, we can have a club, it can be cool, we can get jackets, whatever, like
Grace has been talking about a club with jackets for years now, so give her a reason.
yeah. Give me need to barely like 3 of us and I'll get jackets, you know? Like, we can have a club with 3, that counts. Um, yeah, but I think that there are more. It's not just bipolar. There's all kinds. There's schizophrenia. There's BPD. There's right, like the list goes on. That we've really like. Oh, did you know so and so is? Yeah, but like the medication that I'm on is also for schizophrenia. So like, it ain't that far apart.
I read a study fairly recently that indicated too that borderline personality diagnoses have been going down since autism diagnoses have gone up, especially in women. So clearly there is some overlap there too between what the symptoms actually are and how they manifest in
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
And this isn't easy. Diagnosing mental health issues in most cases involves verbal test batteries, but there's not a you can't go step into an EKG machine and go, "Oh, clearly you're bipolar."
Yeah, no, no. And it like, you have to go through quite some like, it has to go on for quite some time because, like, what do they commonly say? It's sort of 9-month cycles, and maybe,
Mhm.
right? Well, that was the other thing is, like, seasonal affective disorder, right? Was the diagnosis for a while. Like, they were sort of like, "Okay, so it's this, then it's that, then it's this." And the hard part too is that, like, the medication that they're giving you for generalized anxiety or for depression, SSRIs, that shit not only doesn't work, but it makes you feel worse because it's not a serotonin issue. So, like,
And
that's
in
the other thing
fact,
is you
nobody's
become a
got
goddamn
serotonin.
researcher. Yeah.
Right, right. This one's been coming out recently, and the ways in which serotonin and depression are related has been more or less debunked. We've based an entire class of drugs on serotonin and the lack thereof is the cause of your depression. And it turns out, oh, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And we are the
Well,
guinea pigs.
for sure. And I think we haven't focused, I mean, if we're gonna get into some of this, like, and I have my dopamine necklace because I'm just like, we haven't focused enough on dopamine. Like, we're not talking enough about dopamine or noradrenaline or whatever. Like, we've been so focused on serotonin and melatonin, or what's the oxytocin. But it's like, what about the ones that actually help with the functioning? Like the legit fucking motivation and desire and that, which is the root of, like, you need those things to function, to get the things done. If you don't give a fuck. And pain.
Mm. Hmm.
People who are in pain, it's like, where do you have some dopamine? Would you like some?
And the correlation between pain and mental health issues cannot be overstated here. There is a high relationship. I think I read a study, this has been a few years ago now, and it was not a large sample size, but the houseless people in Los Angeles, they did a mental health battery at one point in time, and 90 some odd percent of them had mental health issues. 45% of them were bipolar. So the lack of functioning is really an important part of this question.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, and again, like, these are the kinds of things that also cause a misdiagnosis, right? Like fibromyalgia, ADHD, burnout, and they're all closely related. But it's like, what actually is the thing? And what are what's the thing and what are the symptoms? Because it's almost like a wheel that you can turn and click, right? Like, what's at the top? So, like, is the fibromyalgia causing depression and, whatever? Or is it, turn it again? Is it the depression that's causing the pain and the right? And the lack of ability to function. So it's like, that's why I say keeping a journal of some sort, being able to track what's going on and when and for how long, because those cycles are telling. And having somebody else, like, I mean, somebody that you trust. I would say that obviously someone who lives with you is a great choice, but, like, you have to have a pretty, like, good heart to heart and trust that person enough to not use it against you, because that was really hard for a long time, and I had to make that really clear. Like, this doesn't get used against me. It's, you're either helping or you're sympathizing, but it's not a write off for how I'm feeling, like when I'm expressing an emotion or I'm upset about something.
And you can't defer blame because I've said something to you about your behavior that must automatically mean, oh, well, you're overreacting.
Mhm.
And these are real conversations that we
Mhm.
have to have.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And if you do think that somebody might be bipolar, do not say it in a moment where they're expressing an emotion or they're upset. 'Cause I heard somebody say that to me the other day, that they were, like, getting really frustrated because every time they were upset with something, their family was like, "Oh, this has gotta be because you're," and they haven't been diagnosed or anything, they're just making an assumption and writing off the emotions. So, like, that's a really tricky thing too. Like, that's shady.
Well, and socially, culturally, we are in an era where armchair diagnoses are at an all time high, which is unfortunate when we recognize how difficult it is to get an actual psychiatric diagnosis in the first place.
I know. It's hard because on the one hand, stuff like TikTok, like it's great because it's building awareness, right? Like there's this guy who is a narcissist, diagnosed narcissist, and he has this channel and like it's helpful, but at the same time, it's also got every Tom, Dick, and Harry thinking that their spouse is a narcissist because there's some seemingly comparable or similar shit going on.
If I had a dollar for every time I'd seen narcissism diagnosed on the internet, we would not be here.
No. Yeah. Um So, and I get like when I say, fight for a diagnosis and people might roll their eyes because like, but that's why I'm using the word fight because it is really hard. First of all, there's a lack of doctors in Canada for sure. I don't know about the US, but like we just
Nope,
don't have any
everywhere.
doctors.
Everywhere.
And
Mental health
so
is borked everywhere.
yeah, and trying to get a therapist and or a psychologist, trying to get into the psychiatrist, like you have to have been through, you can't just go in and say like I think I have bipolar. They're going to be like, "Okay, well, let's try these things." And the psychiatrist was extremely helpful. I wish I'd listened to her sooner, to be honest, because she had given me better, like she had uh, suggested a medication that I'm on now like years ago, and I didn't want to take it because I was fearful of it, and now it's the best thing that I've taken to date. So it does become something where you kind of have to keep going and keep going. And when you don't feel well, that's hard to do because you're already fighting for your life just to get up in the morning.
Well, and this is something I say a lot. We are asking people who are least capable of advocating for themselves to advocate for themselves for treatment that is difficult to get. It is really, it's such a painful cycle.
Yeah. 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 I think from this, like, I want people to be more aware who don't experience this, to maybe sort through some of their judgments or misconceptions or things that they've, and at the same time, like simultaneously being more sympathetic or empathetic or whatever towards people who live with really serious mental health issues and diagnoses, but also not judging, like understanding and being sympathetic does not mean judging people and writing them off, right? And so we're still like, and I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, like everybody has their shit. Just because you aren't diagnosed with a serious psychiatric disorder doesn't mean that you're perfect or you're a good person all around. You got your shit that people have to deal with too, right? So same shit, different pile. Shit still stinks.
So, I've already made a list here of things that we'll be covering in the next few episodes. But, folks, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, please drop those in the chat. We'll add them to the list. What do you want to leave us with today, Grace?
Like, I wish I had a better version of Happy Birthday and I would sing it. But but I could sing it like really sultry, like happy birthday to you. I can't believe I'm doing this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Briar. I don't know why I have to wiggle like this. Happy birthday to
And
you.
I'm just, imagining you standing over a steam vent in a white dress. It's
Thank you.
incredible. Thank you. Thank you.
If anybody just caught the end of this, then you won the lottery today. All right. I love you. Thank you. Thanks for
I
having this
love you.
conversation. I know
Yes,
it's not a perfect conversation, but we're having it.
we're having it, and we'll be back with more, y'all. Thanks for being here. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network. If you are not already subscribed, you can do that at neurodiversitymedianetwork.com. It's still July, and we are 20% off right now. There will be one of the things that I want to add for this episode for subscribers. I have a list of really helpful journaling apps that I will throw in that you can use that are emotional trackers that are quick and easy. If writing the thing down for you isn't going to work, here's how you can keep track of your emotional state on a daily basis. So I will be throwing that stuff in, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.